Welcome to the fourth lecture of the current Coffee and Bites series. These coffee lectures are organized by the team of subject librarians for the sciences at the University Library Bern. Today, Nuria Plattner will talk about different options of post-publication peer review.
So today we will have a look at post-publication peer review. You all are certainly familiar with the normal peer review process. Here, a little picture of how it's often perceived. As a researcher, you do your research according to the scientific method, then you have a great result, you write your result up into a manuscript, and then somehow you have to bring your manuscript along this very dangerous road until you reach your goal, namely the paper gets accepted. And then once it's accepted, it ends up in a huge pile of other scientific papers and oftentimes is forgotten again. So emotionally, the peer review process may just seem as a gatekeeping process for getting a paper published. So how does this look in more detail? Most commonly, what is done is once you hand in the manuscript to a journal, there is a brief assessment by the editor whether the paper is suitable for the journal. Then the paper is sent to usually 2 or 3 reviewers. The reviewers write a report, and in these reports, they state whether they want to accept, revise, or reject the paper. Then these reviews go to the author, unless it's right out rejected, and you can answer the reviewer's concern, you can improve the paper, and so on. Then again, there is an assessment by the reviewers whether they like your answers and they like the revised version. This can go back and forth several times until the paper is finally accepted. And then, as stated before, it ends up in the huge pile of scientific publications, unless there is new research based on the result or maybe a review paper. There is not really a way to discuss about it again. So if there is something after the review process still wrong or unclear in the paper, it's difficult to address. I mean, you can try to write directly to the author and clarify, but if there is no answer, this will not end up in the scientific literature unless you go through the whole process again of writing a new paper and submitting it and go to the publication process another round. So this is rather complicated, and it would be desirable to have a more easy and more quick way to discuss already published papers. And one option that has been discussed and used in the last maybe 10 years is publication peer review. In its most basic versions, it means that once a paper is published, you still have the options of doing some peer review and commenting on it, writing review reports, and make this known to the author on a public platform. So how does this work in practice? So the most common platform for this process is the PubPeer platform. This is just a web page you can access. And then you start, if you want to comment on a new paper which doesn't have any comments yet, you just have to start with a unique identifier like the DOI, for example, and then you can start commenting on this paper. Or you just go to a paper which already has comments and add your comment to it. One particular feature of PubPeer is that comments can be made anonymously, and you're free whether you want to address major or minor issues of the paper. And then authors are alerted automatically if there are comments on their paper, and then obviously they have the opportunity to answer to your comments just as they would have in the normal review process. So let's have a quick look on how this looks on the webpage. So here you would just be able to enter DOI or similar identifiers. And then here you can see there have been a lot of recent comments also on these papers. And then you have different levels of responses. Here for all these papers, you already have an auto response. And here, if you go to any of these papers, you just can see the discussion going on. So you can see the different comments and the auto response and so on. So far for the PubPeer platform, the most controversial feature of it is that you can comment anonymously. And this has obviously led to controversies because commenting anonymously, well, the upside is that anyone can comment without fear of negative consequences for his career. This can be very important if you want to comment on a paper of someone who you know or who is responsible, for example, in some position for advancing your career. So this can be very useful. On the other hand, it could potentially also be used for defamation, and this is something to be avoided. In 2013, there has been a case where PubPeer comments led to the retraction of several papers of a University of Michigan researcher because, as it was found out later on, he most likely falsified data. However, the researcher wasn't ready to accept that, and so he sued the commenters for defamation and wanted to reveal their identity, because obviously if he doesn't have their identity, there is not really a court case going forward. However, 2015, the court decided in favor of PubPeer and anonymous commenting. So they didn't have to reveal the identities. Probably particular to this case was that it was a pretty clear case in favor of the commenters because there was clearly a lot of problems with the papers of this researcher, since he had in total to retract 13 papers. If you want to know more about this case, there has been an article on Retraction Watch for this retraction case. So far, I'm not aware on any specific problems with defamation on the PubPeer platform. However, it's not impossible that someone uses this for this purpose. Another way to comment on already published papers is, in many journals, there is just the possibility of commenting. One of these papers is PLOS ONE. This is an open access peer-reviewed journal, and commenting is possible for registered users, so this is also not a very large barrier. And you can add comments. They should add to the research or make clarification. So it's also not very restrictive. So this is more like just any commenting functions. Now you can see it again in the browser. So if you go to any of these articles, you can sort by most popular, and then at the same time you get the most commented papers. And you can, for each paper, look at the comments. So here, for example, you have 3 comments for this paper. This is obviously not just a feature for researchers to comment on papers and give some review reports, but also it's an interesting possibility for the journal to know which articles are particularly interesting and draw a lot of attention. Not all of these post-publication peer review platforms have worked. Most famously, Pubmed had launched a platform, Pubmed Commons, which later on was discontinued. This was much more restrictive than PubPeer because here you had to comment under your real name, and only Pubmed authors were allowed to comment, or they could invite other researchers. And as you can see here, This is a comparison of the number of comments in PubPeer and Pubmed comments. There never was a lot of engagement in this platform, and this was the reason why they finally discontinued it. It's not quite clear why there wasn't much engagement, but probably anonymity is an important factor here. So, and obviously also on PubPeer, you can comment on any paper, and in Pubmed, you are restricted to the Pubmed papers, and you're restricted to being a Pubmed author or invited. So also this is more restrictive. Okay, so with this, we have looked at the first variant of post-publication peer review, which is here option A. You just go through the whole peer review process, publish the paper, and then you go into post-publication peer review. There is, however, another option, which also has been discussed in the past and goes more into the direction of open peer review. This works as follows. So once you have your result, you write your publication, send it to a journal, and then it's directly published after some editor assessment. And it goes into an open peer review process. So there are different types of these processes. They can be really broad and public, or in most cases, you have just the reviewers which make their names known. So it's a completely open peer review process. And then you have the final publications as you would have from the other peer review process as well. One of the most well-known papers for this type of peer review is the Faculty of Thousand Open Peer Review platform. Their papers are, as I explained, published before peer review, then reviewers are invited and peer reviewers' names and comments are visible. You can download all the data in addition to the articles. And what is also particular about this journal, negative results can also be published. So let's have a quick look at this one. If we browse this journal, let's just take a moment, you can see for every research article, this means the peer review report is approving this paper. Here one peer review report does not approve, and here it's approved with some reservations. And you have this for every paper here. Although some are just awaiting peer review, then you have to wait until the reports appear. And what is also nice here, if you click on any of these articles, then you have here the review information. And then, for example, here, this has been rejected by this reviewer. You can directly go to the report. You see who the reviewers were, and you can read the review and make your own opinion about this. So this is also a very interesting format. And with this, I come to the last and probably most common option of post-publication peer review. However, many researchers may use it without even knowing that it's a form of post-publication peer review. This is due to the fact that oftentimes nowadays you don't first send your manuscript into the peer review process and then publish it, but instead you first publish it on a preprint server. And many of these preprint servers also allow for commenting. While you go through the official peer review process with a journal, at the same time you go to the unofficial preprint review. And obviously you're free to also include these comments in the final publication if there is anything useful in them. Now, probably my expectation would be that most of these comments are just unimportant small comments on the paper, just affirmative or something. But for bioRxiv, there has been an evaluation, and they found that 12% of non-author comments are fully review reports. So even though this is not an official peer review process, apparently many researchers put a lot of efforts of writing full review reports. And so it's really an option to use this in order to improve a publication. And also the other advantage is this will remain on the preprint server, so anyone can go back and read these reports. They are publicly available. Okay, so with this, I think I have presented you the most important options for post-publication peer review. The aim of post-publication peer review is to allow a broad discussion on scientific articles, and with this improve scientific literature quality. And the open peer review process can take place after the conventional publishing process or as an alternative to the conventional peer review process. And there are various platforms with different rules of how you can comment. What I would like to know from your side afterwards is, do you think these tools can help to improve the publication process? With this, I would like to thank you for your attention.